All right. So storytelling. This to me is such a fascinating topic because I don't think there's enough people that talk about it. And I'm so thankful to have John Elbing. I'm saying that correctly, right? Elbing? Okay.
Yes.
I am so thankful to have you on. We had talked before and before we recorded. And storytelling to me has been, it's a big part of my profession. When you're training, when you're coaching, teaching, sometimes it has to relate, but you do it in a way that is a little different. So can you give me an idea? Like what is it that you do and why? What's your passion about this?
So first, storytelling. I find that storytelling is this buzzword right now. It's really trendy. Everyone's talking about storytelling. Do a Google search or a YouTube search, and they'll have a million tips and tricks that you start with a hook and you do this and you stand on your left foot and all this kind of stuff. And I find that most of that advice is how to tell your story well, but it's not about how to tell the right story. So that's what I do. What I call it story building, because it's about building the right story. And then it can be a website, it can be a pitch, it can be a presentation, whatever it is. And you can use all those great tools to present it well. But first you have to get the right story. And the whole idea is to flip the script and tell your customer's story or your audience story or your partner's story if you're trying to convince them where to go on vacation. So it's not about me, we. It's about you and how I can fit into your story more than just about the story of the company or the offer or something like that.
Okay, so before we jump into some of the mechanics of it, so your company is called Standpoint.
So important to take the other person's standpoint.
Yeah, I love that. And you're in Europe, so you're available to people here till, I guess, you're 6 hours ahead. So at 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, they could get you, right?
Yeah, so I'm in Geneva, Switzerland. I've worked with people in a lot of different places, and of course, the time difference can be a thing. If you're in California, when you wake up, it's probably I'm finishing my day, but we can always figure something out.
Isn't that crazy how that all works? I'm mesmerized by all of that. I'm done, and then when there's daylight savings time, I think it just messes everybody up. Everybody has to readjust the way they think about the time and who they're meeting with and where, right?
Absolutely.
So how did you come up with the name Standpoint and why? Like, why? Why storytelling? Why?
I've zigged and zagged a lot. I was a software engineer. I did an MBA in finance. I worked in marketing agencies. I did startups. And 10 years ago, I sort of think, what do I want to do with my life? And I had been doing all these things, and I had created brands, and every time I created a brand, it would be a little bit too narrow because I would want to do something else. So I stepped back saying, what is the core of all this, of all the things I do? And it came up this idea to say, well, you take the other person's standpoint. If you're, I did marketing, I worked on projects, and somehow it's always about working with the other person, that empathy. And so that sort of fit. And that was quite an umbrella. And then I tried so many different methods. I have canvases with Post-its and all this kind of thing, design thinking, category design, all this. And I started reading about storytelling. And a lot of the books are sort of like a blog post spread out over 400 pages. But I did find one that I found really good, Storybrand by Don Miller, who's in Tennessee. I went to get certified there. And I realized that working with companies, they're eager to have a story for their marketing, but the process forces them to answer the right questions. Who are you talking to? What's important? What's less important? And it brings a level of focus. It sort of aligns teams because they build the story together. I did a workshop with a company, and there were like 10 people. And I said, okay, take a piece of paper, write down what the company does. And I got 10 stories. And then at the end of our process, they had a shared story, one even saying, can finally tell my mom what I'm doing, kind of thing. And And so I've been developing my own method, and, I came out with a book about it and all this because I found that it has so many ramifications. It's marketing, but it's positioning, it's alignment, it's focus, it's all these things come together. And for me, I have done ads and stuff, but I mean, I'm past building websites and doing Google ads and stuff like that. It's more about really understanding. I work with a lot of deep tech companies that have this really complex thing they're trying to explain, and working with them to build a story that connects with the people that they're serving is really fun, and it helps.
That's really interesting. So, my expertise is really in the sales arena. And I've always been a proponent of salespeople sharing client stories, not necessarily the names in the companies, but just the experience of something when there was a solution that matched what the current person, the prospective client was looking for. I did that for another client. Here's how that went. But that's not the same as what you're talking about. You're talking about actually making it like the corporate story. It's much bigger than just the individual salesperson, right?
Well, yes, but then the whole point is that you use it sort of everywhere in different shapes and forms and lengths and formats. And I think that's a great idea for the salesperson, because what you're doing is you're giving them a proxy, sort of like, imagine this was you. And so that and that's sort of what I'm saying, is you're telling their story. In this case, there's a proxy of another client, but in a similar situation with a similar problem, and then they can imagine a positive outcome and all that. So it's, stories can be big or small. And so at some point, probably your website has that main corporate story, or small company story, or consultant story, or whatever. But then for a specific client, or for a specific product range, or geography, you can sort of adapt that. You're selling for different types of clients. Well, you might have a story that's a little bit different for each of those segments.
Yeah. So what do you think it is that makes the story so important?
Well, I mean, the generic answer to that is we've been telling stories since we were sitting around the campfire.
I don't want the generic answer. I want your answer.
But I mean, somehow there is that. It's stories are two things. There's a story, but it creates an emotion, and we don't remember necessarily what someone told you, but you remember how they made you feel. And so story is just a way of bridging that gap. There's an asymmetry of knowledge. You have this great product service thing, and you're going to change their life, and they have no idea. And somehow, how can you bridge that? And I just find that by telling their story, in your context, gets them to see it. They can understand something intellectually. That's fine. But if they can see, ooh, wow, that's me, and okay, I close my eyes and I can pre-live this positive future, that's really powerful.
So I think it's interesting. So I think real estate agents try to do that when they list homes for sale, and they're doing it. There's not a consistent theme to it, and I'm wondering, does the person's personality and value need to be part of the story? Is that what clients would be attracted to and resonate with?
It really depends on what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I would say that there is a real trend to say, I'm looking for companies that match my values, that have a purpose. And so there are things like that are important. If I'm going to, I'm an independent consultant and I want a CRM, a customer relationship management thing, so, I'm not necessarily going to look at their great mission, but somehow, it's the mission would be, if I go onto a website and it says, we're the best CRM for companies or for teams, I'll swipe, I've already gone. I'm not a team. So And so maybe their product works fine with me, but if I landed on a site that said, we specialize in services for independent consultants with a white beard that live in Switzerland with a cat, I would think, okay, I'm not sure what you offer yet, but you love people like me.
That's so funny. So, okay, so you have a cat, huh? So oh my gosh, she's gorgeous. Is that what kind of cat?
That's a ragdoll.
Right. I know.
And he's a boy.
Oh, well, he's beautiful. He's beautiful. It's funny. Yeah. Why would I look at the way that people market their companies, market themselves, talk about themselves, and some people are hesitant to tell their story because I had a conversation with the guest who I think the podcast dropped last Tuesday. And he even says like he doesn't want it to sound like he's bragging or and we were talking about his story because he's got a great background. He's got his experiences, his background it's like rich with, all kinds of learning and growth and things that he's done. And so when you have somebody like that as a client, how do you work with them through that process?
So there are several steps in this. Some people say, start with talking about you. And I find that that's usually not true. If I'm looking for a product or a service, I'm not interested in the person in the company yet. And it's this yet. Some people say you should or you shouldn't, but here I find that if you can tell my story first, we get you, we understand your situation, we like people like you, we get your challenge, and we have something that can help you. We are the best at helping you be successful. If you can brag, I'm not the best at what I do. I'm the best at making you successful, first of all, is an easier way to brag. And I also feel that people will go down saying, ooh, that's interesting. Ooh, that's for me. Oh, who are these people? And at that moment, they're going to go to the About page, or you can have a section where you say, to show about why you're doing this, your mission, your experience. Of course, there's always social proof. You have testimonials and you have, logos of companies and things that sort of show, okay, they have experience. But if you have a really interesting story, that's really important, just not too soon. If you come in and say, hey, I did this amazing stuff, well, you're sort of like, well, that's almost a put off. But if you say, oh, God, that's interesting. Who are you? People have leaned in, and then you have the space, and then that's really valuable.
Okay. So I don't want to ask you to give away any trade secrets. However,
I'll give them all away.
You will? Good. So, okay, perfect. Yay. Thank you for that permission. What makes a good story?
So, stories are formulaic. Someone wrote up that all the stories of the world, all the novels, all the movies can boil down to 7 stories or 10 stories or whatever it was. And so in marketing stories, there's this formula. And so what I found is that when I encounter a brand, when anyone encounters a brand, we go through 3 steps. And the first one is I need to recognize myself in the company. If I land on something and is this for individuals? Is it for companies, big companies, small companies? Who are they? But if I come in and, land on the thing saying, oh, they work with people like me, there's a first level of trust. It shows that you're interested in your clients. We have a CRM specialized in independent consultants with the cat. I sort of feel, okay, they're people like me. If I was looking for an accountant and you land on all the different accountant sites and one says, we specialize in independence. Well, I think, okay, let's choose that one instead because somehow, I feel that they take me into account. They see me and all that. So this first step of recognition, I find a lot of companies skip. They sort of say, hey, look, this is what we do. But if I say, hey, I see you first, I understand your situation, I'll sort of say, okay, I lean in. And then there's a second step that I call perception, where I have to understand who you are. And there's what category do I put you in? People love putting you in boxes. What do I compare you to? How are you different? Often companies say, this is what we do. Go back to the CRM. Don't tell me what a CRM is. Tell me how you're different from all the other CRMs. That's more interesting. There are trust issues. Do we share values? Do I understand the offer and all that? And then there's a third step, which I call projection, is people are saying, oh, that's interesting. But then they doubt. But it's complicated. And I'll have to install it. And I'll have to, how do I get my data out of my emails and spreadsheets and stuff and things? So I'll actually do this, but I'll come back next week, and then I don't. So if you can accompany them through to show how it'll, the kind of the customer journey, how easy it will be, remind them of the stakes of, if you don't do this, you're going to still have this problem, this problem, this problem. And imagine, close your eyes and imagine, you'll be able to have more clients, be more successful, sleep better at night, whatever it is. You close all those little open boxes, open questions and doubts. And so in this way, with the recognition, you get the right people interested, and hopefully even the wrong people aren't. You can, some people that come in, that that's not the clients you want. Right. And then if you can get them to imagine how it's going to be, there are a few steps further in the engagement. When they finally click the set up a meeting, take a trial or whatever it is, they're already kind of pre-living what you're offering. And that is very engaging, instead of sort of dropping him off and then it's up to them to decide.
So that's interesting. So can storytelling be done in a snippet on social media, like in those little captions on Facebook, or is it not? That's really not the appropriate place.
So once you have a story that sort of, I understand your identity, your aspirations, your challenge, this is all my service, this is my thing, this is our values, this is how we do it, this is why we're different, this is a category, and this is how it's going to happen, this is how it's going to solve, and this is your future. Then, so that could be your website. And each of those little sentences could be a section, and you pull people down and they get the information at the right time. And then you go to a cocktail and say, what do you do? Then you take the short version. And in the short version, so say I'm a gardener. So I can answer, I'm a gardener. And the person will say, oh, that's nice, I'm going to go get a drink. Or I can say, listen, people, little homeowners, they have their little yard and they really want to have a beautiful yard. But when they come home from work, they're tired. Gardening is a pain. And so they have this messy yard. They're ashamed of their yard. So I offer this service where I make these yards really beautiful, and they're so proud. They have the best barbecues with their neighbors. Everyone envies them. And so, basically I said I'm a gardener, but somehow people can imagine that story and there's this empathy, and that's a lot more interesting.
So when I hear that, I can visualize. You must have a beautiful garden. You must have a beautiful garden. And I can visualize that you probably, and my next question would naturally be, so did you learn on this, did you learn this by yourself, or did you go to school to be a gardener? Do you take classes? And then what's your favorite thing to garden? And then is it vegetable? I mean, we could get into a whole thing. Exactly.
But to come back to your question about Instagram or something where you don't even
Facebook.
have that much.
Yeah, you have like a snippet.
So there you sort of have to pick a thing, sort of say, are you ashamed of your yard?
Oh, that's confrontational. I'd be like, yes.
And sort of think, well, yes, well, I can, or something. So you pick out a bit of the story, and again, you probably have some variations, and you have different aspirations and different challenges that you can sort of trigger. So there's a lot of ways of repurposing that story depending on the format. And
so you really have to define. it sounds to me that you really have to define who your ideal client is and then match that story to the way that they need to hear it so that it resonates with them? Or is there something else that I'm missing?
No, that's interesting, because often I found companies that have a solution, so they think their customers have the problem that actually fits the solution. So I'm a financial advisors, and so people, their frustration is they're not sure what stocks to pick. And that's probably not the case. The case is they're worried about their kids' college fund or something. And often and so if you can actually have a vocabulary, have a story that matches how people feel, how they talk to themselves, it's not necessarily that one-to-one easy match of, if my dishwasher is broken, well, someone's going to come and fix my dishwasher. I mean, that's pretty easy. But I did find a company, when you're trying to find a handyman to come and fix something like that, what is your main worry?
About the dishwasher, that they won't show up.
They won't show up, or they'll be late. So you have to take a full day off. So this ad was, we arrive on time. It wasn't, we're good plumbers or we're good whatever. Someone coming to fix a, appliance, you're not worried about the quality of the work. You're worried about, will they arrive? When will they arrive? Can I trust them? And so they really felt that was the worry, and that's how they connect. So they say, and that does so many things. It sort of says, we respect you. Your time is just as valuable as ours.
Yeah.
The other people, don't care about your time, but for fixing an appliance, that's a powerful message of trust, of concern, of respect. So I think that's pretty amazing.
That is interesting. So how does a client develop the right questions or the best questions to ask themselves to ensure that they're attracting the right client?
So I built this method called Storybuilding, and it came out as a book. And
Yay!
And basically, I've created a series of canvases where you put Post-its. It doesn't have to be Post-its, but it's sort of that image. You have a wall and you have squares, and they ask questions, and you have to put up Post-its. And so there's a first canvas about your customer, sort of forgetting who you are, who's your customer, and then about your company. And then you put that into a framework that's a story, but the structure of a story, and then it helps you actually write your first story. And there's other things like that. So there's really a process where you go in at one end, and you go through and you revise it, and, you challenge it. And there's this, just one example. You say you're looking for the customer's aspiration. There's their aspiration and there's a problem. And usually there's a little bit of both. You want to do this, but you're stuck. And that thing is powerful. Well, that aspiration could be, I want a tool to get the job done, or I want to be successful, or I want to feel safe, or I want to, and that aspiration, you can play with all these levels of between really down to earth things to, I want to feel like a professional. I want to, whatever it is. And by going through that with I find that companies know their customers a lot better than they think. When you have the right questions to tell, they have a lot of information that's sort of hidden. You can always go back and validate with customers, see how they react, interview customers. You can do this at different levels. But just this idea to say, no, what they're really worried about is I won't come on time. And then you change your story to sort of fit the way your customer feels, how they think. It's a real process, systematic process to create the story.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to tell us a story. Can you share a client story? You don't have to tell us the company name, of how you took them from maybe no story to like the process, and then what the end result was.
Are you
allowed to do that?
Yeah, sure. I even have some case studies in the book and stuff. So I've asked clients if I could talk about that.
Cool.
So I worked with a company called Felco, which is the world leader of garden shears here in Switzerland. And so, really for working, the working people in the fields, they'll buy this that are really expensive, but they last forever. And you can repair them, instead of changing it every year because it breaks.
Can we buy them in the US? Because
Yes.
my husband might want them. What's the name of the company?
Felco, Felco.
Okay, you should get some kind of royalty for that, but okay, go ahead.
So what's interesting with the story is they were doing professional tools, and you go in and they went through distributors and things. And so the third generation, this is an 80-year-old company, the third generation sort of took over the company, and they created an e-commerce website. And they realized that there were kind of gentlemen gardeners that loved these tools. People had Felco tattooed on their body like Harley Davidson.
Wow.
And they thought, oh, wow, we have this whole segment that we weren't talking to. So they started creating, ones with leather handles and golden blades and with designers and all this thing. But the story was still the same. You went on the website and it was like, Swiss quality, all this kind of stuff. And then everything was mixed. You'd have the heavy duty one next to the gold plated one. So we did this not only to create a story, but to create two stories. So that you have, because you can the Swiss quality, repairable, all this stuff is the same for both. So how do you talk to them differently? So we really created a persona for the professional and, how they feel it, their need, their thing. And then another one for, the amateur gardener and their aspiration, which was different. And so not only was it important to create a story, but we needed two stories and two stories that weren't the same. And then their distributors could have those two stories to tell, depending on which of these segments they were touching. And then they hired $1 million marketing company to redo their website and their thing and all that. I just did the kind of foundational story.
Well, I wouldn't say that was just that you did that. I think that it was you launched it, right?
Yeah. So that was fun.
Yeah. And so, how long ago was that?
Last year.
Oh, so fairly recent.
Oh yeah, I haven't even checked if they what's the actual level of implementation.
And then once they do that, so here's something that I found in my past. Marketing would do this great stuff. They would, maybe not the storytelling, but they would do other things. They would market and they would attract different clients, but they didn't share their marketing strategies or the reason why they were marketing or who they were marketing to with the sales team. So marketing and sales were in two different camps and they were almost like complaining about each other.
Yeah. If something didn't work, the marketing wasn't good enough. And then the marketing says, hey, you can't even come through with our leads. I've seen that so much.
Okay. So you've lived that also. So one of the things that we would do is I would put people in the room together. I would have trainings for the marketing and the sales teams together to try and make it a little cohesive so they could understand, and that because it was so interesting that the messaging was not consistent. And that was a big problem because the salespeople were saying one thing, the marketing was saying something else, and the clients were getting very mixed messages. So how do you take a company like a Felco or any other client and emphasize the importance of consistent messaging throughout the whole organization? Because marketing does what marketing does. The website does what the website does, but how do you change that culturally?
So one thing, it sort of depends a little bit on the size of the company. So, I've worked with medium-sized companies where you have the client-facing team and the marketing team and the kind of the founder or whatever work together to build the story, because the salespeople have that direct feedback from the customers, and the marketings are the ones that's going to actually implement that. And it's sort of that mix. They come out with a sort of a co-built, co-owned story. And then that's kind of that foundation seems to work a little better.
Yeah, that's good.
No,
go ahead,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Well, I was just going to say, I think doing it at the inception and having everybody take part and participate gives everybody ownership, and then nobody can say, "Well, I didn't know that." So,
I mean, sometimes I have companies that need better marketing, and then they say, "Oh, wow, that was cool because we got team alignment and positioning." And other companies says, "We need to redo the positioning together," and we have a great story to tell for our market. I mean, these two sides. One thing I've been working on recently is a thing around what I call narrative drift. So with AI, I've been building tools that will analyze your website and come up with, this is your current standpoint. Is this really what you want to say? And then these are all your social channels and other assets. What percentage is on narrative? Or are you saying something different? And then what you're saying on the LinkedIn company page probably shouldn't be the same as the founder talking or the marketing team talking. So what is the role of each? And then have an ongoing, and then build an engine where they can pre-process things that are published to be sure that it matches the chosen narrative, and even have an ongoing, monitor to sort of have an alert to say, you posted that last week and that doesn't fit the narrative. And so this coherence is really important. And I don't see people doing that as much, even to the point of, if I ask AI what you do, what will it say? And if it's not saying what you hope it says, how can you
how do you fix it? Yeah. That's interesting. That's really interesting. So that brings in another whole aspect to this. One of our other guests earlier we talked a lot about AI, and we were thinking, like, when I go on Google and I do a search for my name, I know what comes up. I see my website links. I see all that. I've never done a search just on, I guess, Gemini. I'm not sure. Like, what's the right platform to do that, to see what your story is and what people are seeing about you through the eyes of AI?
Yeah, well, you can just go on to ChatGPT and onto Claude and just say, I have a friend that I'm sort of helping with this stuff. And when he said, what is the best company to do this? And he was really proud that he popped up pretty,
good for him.
But they're very expensive. And he has no pricing whatsoever on his website. And so somehow AI hallucinated the fact that he was expensive.
Wow.
So we changed the website to say competitive pricing. I mean, he doesn't want to, there's a whole negotiation and things, so he didn't want to put actual prices. But by changing that, we went back a little bit later and the expensive part had disappeared.
Wow. So you really have to scrub everything that's on your website and how you show up in your social posts.
Yeah, all this matters. And
yeah. Interesting. So if somebody wants to work with you, who's your ideal client?
So, I coach also startups, and startups, they come up and say, hey, we do everything for everybody. And so, I feel that my incredible method will be great for any company in the world, but somehow that's not really the case. I think there are moments, there are kind of trigger moments where this is important. So if a company is going through some kind of pivotal moment, there was just an MBO, there was a merger, they're launching a new product, they're opening a new market, they're doing something. There's something where they sort of say, hey, we need to step back and check. There's this other company, there's this one company in Geneva I use as a bad example. They've been around for 60 years and they're successful. And I mean, their story is so bad. But you think, why would they look for someone like me to change it? Life goes on. So I find that you have to realize that this is complex. You can do better. you can work on all this. There's this way of improving. So I do work more with medium-sized companies. I don't think Unilever is going to come to me to try to redo their story. I do a lot of tech. I do a lot of companies like that, but also B2B or B2C. Less life science, I would say, than others. Even done a little. So you can. If you go to standpoint.ch, I'm in Switzerland, so it's .ch. It's because it's Switzerland or something. And so you can see, there's things around the method, about the book, about the, how we can work together. And right now I'm sort of adding some new offers around these narrative analysis and drifts and to help work that, it might be out by the time you publish.
Okay, good.
And so, you can go on that. You can directly, there's a calendar. You can directly take a half an hour slot to talk about your brand, to brainstorm, and you'll probably, by the time you get to this, you can get a first diagnostic of your whole web presence for free, and there's another tool to help you create a tagline with different formats and different things, and the whole asks about your customer and your thing and all this, and it's sort of to come up to that perfect tagline. So go to standpoint.ch. You can also leave me a message, say you're coming from Debra's podcast, and I'll put you at the top of the list.
Oh, thank you. And if it's 6:00 at night in the US, don't expect a response before mid-afternoon the next day, right?
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Is there, so one last thought, any nugget, last bit of advice for anyone who's trying to figure out what their story is and how to get it out there to the masses?
Well, sort of as a first step, an easy thing is to sort of try to forget. The problem with a company is that they know too much. And you want to say everything. And so you go on the website and everything is there, but try to, forget and come on to say, can I immediately know for who that's for? Who's the customer of this company? Because that's something that's a first relatively easy fix to say, we work with this type of company because we love them and we know especially about that. That's a first hook that brings that engagement and trust at the beginning. If you come in and it's all about what you do and you don't really know who it's for, that little test is a good first step, I would say.
Nice. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. All right. So John Elbing with its Standpoint, right? Standpoint. And it's not storytelling, it's story building. I corrected myself.
Exactly.
Yeah, we so appreciate you. Thank you so much. And this is another episode of OOMPH Podcast. Buy the book. It's on Amazon. It's like $9.99. It's a small little book. It's about the 5 pillars that help you move from stuck to unstoppable. And my name's Debra Pearlman. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.